What a lot of people don't realize, in 2016, for the first time in U.S. history, 51% of Americans chose a cremation over a traditional funeral. And by 2040, we'll be on par with Asia and Europe. They're saying 80% in America.
Wow.
So I'm looking at all this. The funeral care industry in America hasn't changed in 150 years. You see a loss sometimes in customer service. You see a loss sometimes in passions in the industry, and that affects the way, business occurs in those industries. So we just saw an opportunity and eventually got to the point, it's like, I think this is us.
Welcome to In Good Company, elder care in your backyard.
Ryan Horn is the founder and co-owner of Eden Cremation, a family and veteran-owned funeral home serving the greater Springfield area. After experiencing firsthand the challenges of losing loved ones, Ryan was inspired to create a simpler, more compassionate approach to end-of-life care. Guided by his military background and deep respect for service, he built Eden Cremation around the values of dignity, integrity, and heartfelt support. Ryan's mission is to ensure every family feels seen, cared for, and comforted during life's most difficult moments. Welcome to our show.
Awesome. Thank you, Spencer. John, great to be with you guys. Appreciate that.
We're really glad you're on the show today. I think there's a lot of, for me personally, I have just a lot of things that I'm just curious about this area. And with our particular podcast, what we're trying to do is help people understand some things around cost. We're trying to get people preparing for whatever comes. Yeah. And I think we have seen people that are extremely stressed, in whether it's their loved one is dealing with a healthcare crisis or someone's passing away. And as Ann Jeanette had beautifully said, there's Jerry Springer moments.
Oh, absolutely.
Not everybody out there is going to know that reference, but I knew it the second she said it. But really, it's about just getting everyone understanding about like what's available out there. Trying to help people be good consumers around these things that are maybe a little bit mysterious. And so tell us about your company and how you got into it.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you, John. Well, first of all, and again, right back at you guys, thank you for what you're doing. And thank you for the podcast. What a service to the community. Just talking to some of you guys before this about some of the topics that you're covering. I wasn't even thinking about all the things there are to talk about. So I'm sure a lot of people are getting a lot of great value from the content. So thank you. Yeah, so Eden Cremation, well, really, it's a story. Just over 5 years ago, my mom passed away back in the Louisville, Kentucky area. And when I was with her those last few days, she had said she wanted to be cremated. And no one in our family had ever been cremated before. We were accustomed to funerals, a traditional funeral. And so it kind of threw me for a loop, like, you want what, Mom? And so it kind of sent me down this rabbit hole to just better understand, like, well, what is cremation? How does it work? Who does that? And, in some ways in America, in the West, it's even been a little taboo, in a Christian society. Some people have concerns and other things. And just more and more, though, in the last decade plus, I've really realized that those taboos have kind of worn off as we've become more globally connected with the world through better transportation and these devices, that are everywhere. We're seeing how the rest of the world lives, and we're finding out, if you're a Christian in Tokyo, Japan, you don't even have a choice. You gotta be cremated because there's just not space to continue to do, burials. So all these factors, but it sent me down this hole, and it's like, well, that's what my mom wants. So, I've got to honor her wishes. And as I was working with a local funeral home to set that up and make those arrangements, I didn't have a great experience. The customer service wasn't great. When they came to make the removal, it was less than satisfactory. And so I was left feeling like, man, that was really unfortunate, because here you are at one of the most vulnerable and sometimes even traumatic, depending on the set of circumstances around that, points of your life, and you're getting ready to turn over your loved one, someone very dear to you, to other strangers, and you just want to feel like they're going to safeguard and take care with honor and integrity one of the greatest things that you can put into their hands. In that case, my mother, and honestly, it was not a great experience. And so that always left me in the back of my mind like, man, there's got to be a better way. There's got to be another way of doing this that can really bring compassion and empathy and sympathy to the families that are being served at that moment. So that really started me just kind of going down this road of, I ran an international publishing house.
Oh, really?
That's what I did.
Okay.
I traveled the world, was in a totally different line of work. And so death care was never on my radar. And but we've always had a passion to serve our community, and we love and especially serving people. And we really try to do a lot in our own lives so that our kids see that, and hopefully that rubs off on them. So as I just started exploring this from just more of a business standpoint, I remember telling my wife, like, hey, if someone felt a calling to the death care industry, there's a real opportunity here. Because what a lot of people don't realize, in 2016, for the first time in U.S. history, 51% of Americans chose a cremation over a traditional funeral. So it was the first time for us in this country that we saw the majority move towards cremation. Here we are in 2025, just 9 years later, and that national average is hovering at 60%.
Wow.
And by 2033, it's going to be around 73%. And by 2040, we'll be on par with Asia and Europe. They're saying 80% in America.
Wow.
So I'm looking at all of this because that's what my mom wants. And I'm seeing these trends, and I'm seeing society's moving this direction. And as I start kind of just exploring that a little bit and having conversations with people that work in the industry, I started learning a lot of things that just really, I don't know how far you want me to go with that.
Keep going.
Okay.
You're on a roll.
Yeah. I started learning a lot of things that just continued to intrigue me. And one of those was, when you look at the funeral care industry in America, hasn't changed in 150 years. Somewhere way back, great-great-great-grandpa so-and-so started so-and-so's funeral home in rural, local town America. And then when he passed, it just naturally passed to his son or his daughter. And here we are, and it then becomes father and sons. And we have these all over America. Well, I think what happened was that first family member that started the funeral home, he obviously had a passion for that industry, and he went into it. But that doesn't mean the third generation shares that passion. What's happening is they're just acquiring a business that someone in their family had a passion for. They may not share the same passion, but now it's become hey, this is our means to life. This is how we make a living. So I'm next man up, and I'll manage the business now. And I think with that, you see a loss sometimes in customer service. You see a loss sometimes in passions in the industry, and that affects the way business occurs in those industries. So we just saw an opportunity, and it finally got to a point where we were just sitting around going, well, is this us? We keep saying if someone else wanted to, but is this us? And then we just, we kind of prayed about it, spent a lot of time talking about it. I had a great job. I was having a lot of fun traveling the world, doing what I was doing. And eventually got to the point, it's like, I think this is us. I think we could do this in the Ozarks in a way that would just be a great value add to the community. And as people are thinking about end-of-life decisions like this, and they're thinking about maybe cremation as their choice, our desire is at some point for people to say, hey, if cremation is what you're going to do, in that case, no one's better than Eden Cremation. The staff is amazing. They're respectful. They're always going to show up promptly. They're going to look professional. They're going to treat your family very well when they're there to make that removal. And they're just going to make that whole process as seamless as possible. And, take one of the most difficult moments in people's lives. You can't make it go away, but you can make that process a little easier. And so that's our objective. That's our goal. And that's how we got here, I guess.
Incredible. Yeah.
So with who your core customer is it funeral homes that make the majority of your referrals, or is it direct consumer? Yeah,
that's a great question. So, they call this industry in one way, it's a little bit of what they call a break-fix industry. It's something a lot of people don't want to think about, and they don't think about it until they need it. Right? It's kind of like the Brad Bradshaw signs all over town. Like, you're probably not going to need him, but when you do have that accident, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Yeah, I mean, there it is. Yeah. And so for probably about 80% of people, they're sitting at mercy, or they're sitting somewhere, they suddenly lose that loved one, and they're like, what are we going to do? Well, maybe they make the decision, cremation, I guess. Okay, well, who does that? I don't know. And they get out the phone, and honestly, 80% of people probably just Google cremation near me, funeral homes near me, and then they make that first phone call. And so a lot of that business does come in just through that. But a tremendous amount of referrals come through hospice providers like Haven, Phoenix, and many others like that, because obviously they're dealing with hospice, they're making that end of life plan for families. And a lot of times when that social worker's making that plan with a family member, they're in the same situation. Well, we haven't really given it much thought yet. This happened so quickly. You guys do this all the time. Do you know companies that you know have a good reputation? And so we're trying to earn trust with a lot of the hospice providers in the community by serving them well. That serves their families well. And then hopefully, like any business, that leads to a good reputation and leads to continued referrals. So a lot is now starting to come in through hospice, connecting with chaplains at Cox and Mercy Hospital and things like that, and building relationships with them a lot of times because they have the opportunity in those environments a lot of times to make referrals. But we do some traditional advertising. We're on a local radio station, and we've ran a billboard, and we've done some of those things. But more and more, I see it just coming through as we deliver a really good experience, as good as you can in a moment like that to a family. That word just spreads, it seems like, organically. And so, yeah.
That's awesome.
Wow. As a veteran, service plays a big role in your life. How does the sense of duty and respect translate into the care you provide through Eden?
Yeah. So I was an Air Force veteran, 4 years out of high school, and then I let them pay for my college. So, but, just serving in the military, I think there are certain values that get really espoused by you while you're there, and they get pressed upon you. And some of those things are just doing things with honor, doing things with integrity, doing things the right way the first time. And so I think that carries over into life. I think it carries over into business, and especially for Eden. I just think there's some industries and businesses out there where maybe you can afford, I don't know if you really ever can, but maybe you can afford more so than others to be a little haphazard, a little sloppy at times. It's not going to serve you well as a business owner, but certainly there are people that take that liberty. But in this business especially, you can do that about once, do things without integrity, do things the wrong way, and that could ruin you. And so, we just want to hold ourselves to really high standards, and we want that to carry over into the business. And, they say your reputation precedes you. So hopefully that's what happens with us as well. Yeah.
So you mentioned a bad experience in your personal life. Help us compare and contrast what a good experience versus a bad. What should people expect?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, it sounds silly, right? Like for me to say some of these things that I'm about ready to say, but I think first and foremost, they should expect compassion more than anything else. When someone has just lost a loved one, they expect that provider to come alongside them and be a listening ear, to be incredibly gentle and compassionate and understanding. And when I started to do some of that initial research about this industry, I realized that wasn't always the case. But I think it's reasonable for the customer, the family, to expect, when they make that first phone call, what we call a death call, or first call, that whoever's going to answer up on the other end of that line is going to be incredibly sympathetic and understanding and compassionate, that they're going to almost serve as a guide to them, because a lot of times their heads are in so many different places, and this happens so fast, and I'm sorry, I can't find my words right now. And they need you to just kind of usher them through the moment and reassure them, hey, it's going to be okay. Here's what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to do it for you. And just kind of walking them through that process. And then when you go to the home to make that first removal, wow, first impressions are everything. Well, when you walk into someone's home, their sacred space to get grandpa or to get mom or to get dad, how you show up matters, right? How you look and how you appear to the family and how you interact with the family. And again, some of these things sound simple and just like matter of fact and like, well, yeah, of course. But what we know and what we practice sometimes don't always, jive. And I was realizing again, when I was researching the industry, that's not always, don't take that for granted. That doesn't always happen from different experiences for people. And then just keeping the family informed throughout the process. Once you bring that loved one back to our facility, we do our part. Don't leave them at home just waiting. Do we make the next call? Do they make the next call? Let them know, hey, here's what we're going to do. And here's when you'll be expecting to hear from us. And when you do hear from us again, here's what's going to happen. And here's what you'll need to be ready to do. And just walking them through that whole process as best you can from beginning to end. And, It's like everyone can see what Chick-fil-A is doing to have incredible success, but for some reason they're not replicating it, right? Like people will stand in line at Chick-fil-A a mile down the road because they know it's going to move fast and they're going to get to hear it's my pleasure. But McDonald's and Wendy's aren't taking cues from that. So I don't know. I guess it's like some things are obvious, but not everyone's doing the obvious, I guess.
One thing you bring up a really good point, pointing out Chick-fil-A, and one of the things that I dug in on Chick-fil-A was how they handle their ownership and how many Chick-fil-A's an owner gets to have, how much expectation there is for training for them, how much time they need to spend in those Chick-fil-A's themselves, that sort of thing. And so ownership matters.
Yeah.
I like to circle back to this all the time in this podcast because that's why we like to help people directed towards local businesses, because oftentimes those owners are directly involved with day-to-day operations. If they're not, then usually those local businesses aren't as high a quality when a business owner steps out. So let me circle back to I'm going to walk this family through. So I'm a family member, I'm calling you, and I know every situation might be slightly different, but just generally speaking, what are getting into the gritty details, so to speak, what are you going to tell me I should expect to happen in what time frame, that sort of thing? Just give me the whole experience.
Yeah. It's a great question, and every phone call is a little nuanced and a little bit different, right? Because a lot of that can depend too on where did that death occur? Is this a family member calling because they just found out that an uncle that's living in Springfield had passed away and he's being held at the Greene County Medical Examiner's office or the coroner's office, or was it a death at the hospital with the family there by their side, or a hospice situation at home where it was people were kind of somewhat preparing for the inevitable, or was it just depending? But by and large, if you take the average call, if you will, if there's such a thing in this industry as an average call, right? That first phone call comes in from the family member and says, hey, we're sitting here at the hospital and just lost Dad and we don't know what to do next. What do we do now? We just, we kind of walk them through everything that they need to do in order for us to help take care of the situation. In that case, at Mercy, it's like, hey, you're going to need to let the nurse there on staff that you've been working with, let them know that your family has chosen Eden Cremation, because a lot of hospitals have protocols, and that is they're the ones that choose when they're going to release that family member. So the only thing you need to worry about right now is let the nursing staff know you've chosen to work with Eden Cremation. And then when they're ready to release your loved one, they're going to make that call to us directly, and then we're going to come pick up your loved one. When we do, what you can expect is within a few hours after we pick him up and they're in our care, then we're going to be reaching back out to you to gather some of the necessary information that we're going to need to start paperwork, because we got to notify Social Security. We got to get the paperwork we need to file the death certificate with the state. And so for now, you don't need to worry about anything. Just let the nursing staff know once we make that removal, you'll hear from us within a few hours. We're going to ask you some questions to gather some paperwork. We'll go over a timeline with you then of now what you can expect as far as timeline and when what will happen, and we'll kind of walk you through those next steps. Okay. Thank you. And that gives them some measure of, all right, I know what my next action step is. And then they do that. And then that hospital calls us eventually and we go make that removal. And once we have them and we've checked them in and established chain of custody, then we're following back up with that next of kin, that family member, and saying, okay, it's a great time to sit down now and ask you a few questions over the phone so we can start the process. And, a lot of times that call is about 15 or 20 minutes of just gathering details that are needed for notifying Social Security, the filing of the death certificate. And once we have all the information we need, then we're letting them know, okay, from here, based on kind of where we're at, probably you're going to hear from us again in about 3 or 4 days. And that will then be to start making arrangements for when you're going to come and pick up the remains or opportunities if you want to purchase a different urn or something like that. So we'll just walk them through all those next steps. And then once we've filed all the paperwork, once we have that death certificate, once we've done the cremation, then we're calling the family again to say, hey, everything is ready to go. And we want to just kind of work with you to schedule a good day and time for you to come by the office and pick things up. And of course, in between time, there's sometimes other phone calls. They've got questions or they need to know about this, or there was a life insurance policy sometimes that's going to cover that cremation. And so You never really know. But by and large, whether that death occurs at home or at a hospital, when we get that first phone call, it's walking them through what the immediate steps are, what we're going to do, what action we're going to take, what action they need to take, if any, and then when our next touch point will be with them. And then we'll go again from there. And so we're just always giving them the next step and walking them through what to expect and what's going to occur.
Just more curiosity starts to seep in. So I have more questions around it. So I know that some people get really concerned about what's going to happen to this body, who's going to be with them, how is that going to be taken care of? Like, is there something I need to do in the home? Like, do I in hospice, typically when we're preparing someone after they've passed, there's a bath that happens where the nurse is, giving them a bath to, get everything kind of prepared, but not every situation fits that. So is there some nuance to that where you're having to do some extra steps? Yeah.
Well, one thing that's different about cremation other than a traditional funeral, right, is with a traditional funeral, you're gonna probably embalm that individual. You're going to redress them and make them up and get them presentable in such a way that now there can be a viewing and a whole funeral service. We don't offer those services at our crematory. It's very just simple and specific. It's for people that are looking for cremation at a very affordable cost without losing a great customer service experience. And then the family often will decide after the fact, are we going to do a memorial service or a celebration of life service in a few weeks, in a month, 2 months, whatever. They have a lot of flexibility there. So we don't have a lot of the same things going on as a traditional funeral, where inside the building, we're embalming, we're doing prep, we're doing viewings and all of that. So it's a little bit different process. I mean, once we come in that case to like a home where someone passed while on hospice, right? The hospice nurse usually does a really good job of getting them ready, dressed the way the family wants them, cleaned up in order to leave the home with dignity, right? Mm-hmm. And then we show up and we bring that individual into our care. And from there, really for us, what we do, the most important thing is chain of custody. Like, we want to establish chain of custody from the moment we take possession of that loved one. They get ID'd a certain way, and then that ID stays with them all the way through into checking into the facility, every step that they take through the facility up to cremation, and then as they exit the cremation and back to returning those remains to the family. So there's not really a whole lot of kind of prep work or things for the family to do or concern themselves with when it comes to the body itself. It's like, once we make that removal, that is the last time the family will see, if they're using our services, that is the last time they'll see that loved one again. So we always tell them when they call us, make sure you get the closure that you need and you get to say the goodbyes that you feel you're going to need before we leave with your loved one, because that will be your last opportunity. The next time they'll see them again, it will be receiving their remains. And so, but most of them, when they call, that's exactly what they know they're signing up for, and it's what they know they're getting. But they've chosen cremation as the final disposition that their family is most comfortable with. When I talked about the numbers in cremation, how just a few years ago we went over 50% for the first time, and now we're at 60 and we're going into the 70 and then 80%. There are really three factors that really are driving that rapid increase in America of adoption of cremation rather than a traditional funeral. One is just the basic economics, right? Like, for the average funeral today in the United States is anywhere between $12,000 and $15,000. And for a lot of people, when that just suddenly happens in a moment, to come up, one, it's already a very traumatic time. It's very stressful, all the decisions that are having to be made. And then the average family has to come up with $12,000 to $15,000 to cover a funeral. Whereas an average cremation in the United States, the average is about $2,000. So one, it's pure economics, $2,000, $12,000 to $15,000. It's a big factor for a lot of families in the United States. A second, though, reason that's really driving that is as transportation and communication gets better and allows us to move all over the world, and people are very transient. 50 years ago when someone passed away, most of the family lived in about a 50-mile radius. And so when that individual passed away, 3 or 4 days later to converge and be at a funeral together wasn't real difficult. Now people have a son that's off at college in Florida or New York City, and another family member that's maybe a missionary over in Spain. And you got these families just spread out all over the United States. So to drop everything and for all these people to come back into this area within a 4-day window is getting increasingly difficult. So cremation has given families flexibility. Hey, we'll mourn, we'll grieve, we'll do the cremation, and then we'll plan 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks down the road when we can make this work. It brings a lot of other stress down for the family. When my mom passed, it was 2.5 months later before we did her celebration of life service. But it was beautiful. We had already grieved, done a lot of our grieving. So when we came together, it really was a celebration of life, because it was almost kind of like, okay, now we're ready to do this. And everybody was gathered, and it wasn't quite as fresh and traumatic. And we're thinking, yeah, we got to do this, but we have all these other things now that we have to do as well. It gives you a lot of freedom. So I think that's another thing. Then a third thing, this younger generation coming up behind us, they're wanting to live the American dream, but a lot of them are wondering how they're going to afford a home, and land prices and everything's so expensive. So in this younger generation's mind, they're saying, why are we continuing to take bodies and take up all this open space and land for cemeteries that most people never visit like they used to 25, 50, 75 years ago? You went to the cemeteries and you put the flowers out, and that's what you did on Memorial Day. Well, increasingly that's kind of losing a lot of its former tradition is just kind of waning. So people aren't visiting those sites as often anymore. So then this younger generation is saying, well, why are we then taking up all this space that we can't even afford to begin with? And so there's a lot of converging just factors that are and the religious taboos have come off it in the U.S. I think people that may be worried at one time, is this desecration of the body, or can God resurrect this? And it's kind of like, well, if you are a Bible believing Christian, he started out with a handful of dust when he made man, and
dust shall return.
And that's kind of where we're taking. So if he did it the first time, I'm sure he can do it again, and I think that's just becoming widely accepted in the church. And so a lot of factors driving people in this direction, though. Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating.
I'm assuming some of the calls come in from out of state, from family members. I guess, how does that process work? Do they have to, get on a plane to come here to get the remains?
Yeah, no. So that's another thing that's really convenient, unlike having to transport a body, that's going to have to be transported by vehicle across state lines. And then there's a lot of regulations that go with that from state to state, or flying them on a plane back home. The nice thing about, because we do get that call a lot, right? We get the call from, the other day, 2 daughters in Iowa. Their dad was here by himself. He's been living here for years. They just got a call that their dad had passed. They hadn't seen him in years. And so they called us and asked us to perform the cremation. And afterwards, they're, well, okay, what do we need to do? Do we drive down from Iowa now to pick up our dad? And I said, well, in the United States, we can ship what are called cremains, is what it's called officially by the government, right? And we can ship. The only shipper, though, in the U.S. that you can use for cremated remains is the Postal Service, USPS. Okay. So you can't FedEx, you can't UPS. And then you have to ship them a certain way. But we ship a lot of cremated remains back all over the country because of that exact thing. So that family member that loses someone here that's in California, they never have to make the trip. They never have to come. We do everything by DocuSign, is getting so popular now in real estate transactions and everything. So we just send the paperwork that they have to sign through e-signature. They sign it, comes back to us. We file the paperwork, we do the cremation, and then we ship those remains to wherever they are in the country.
What percentage of cremations are sent out versus picked up? Just curious, ballpark.
Yeah, I would say in my own experience, maybe 10%.
Okay.
So, it certainly is happening, and it's happening frequently, but it's not even close to the majority, but we're doing it with somewhat frequency. Yeah. Yeah.
What's the most common question you get during one of those death calls?
During a death call?
Yes.
Yeah. What do I do?
Yeah.
I think most people, they're just in that moment and they're rattled, they're frazzled, they're absent-minded, and they're just like, we just lost our dad. What do we do? Mm-hmm. And of course, the very first thing we always do is say, we're so sorry. We're so sorry. I can't imagine, and just empathize with them. And then but here's what we'll do for you, and here's how we'll do it. And I think it's just, what do I do? What's my next steps? Well, you made the first right call, and here's what you need to do now, and then here's what we're going to do, and here's how we're going to take over. But yeah, it sounds simple, but what do we do? And then just give them the necessary information to kind of start to relax a little bit. And we always say, look, we know you have a million other things you need to worry about right now, so you don't need to worry about this. We're going to take really good care of your loved one. They're going to be in good hands. And you worry about you right now. We'll take care of your loved one. And it's amazing to hear them just almost take a deep breath over the phone, like someone gave me because that's what they're like. They don't even ask, but they're needing someone to give them permission to say, hey, I've got this. I'll take care of this for you. You take care of all the other things. You don't need to worry about this right now. And it's amazing the peace that kind of fills the atmosphere when you communicate that to them, and how they go at ease. And so, but some people, I think probably more of what you were looking for, though, maybe is like, what's the big question? Is like, how does that work? What happens in cremation? And people are a little bit intrigued and interested to know, more about it. For a lot of people, I hate to say this, but a lot of people, when they think cremation, they think of probably the last World War II movie they watched.
Okay.
I'm serious. Like,
really?
It's amazing, because that's their only context for it. And it's like, no, this is done in the most humane and dignified way ever. And crematories are so regulated by the state. And we have inspectors drop into our facilities, unannounced, and making sure that everything is ran right and everything looks good, and that you're doing things the right way. And so it's just, I think a lot of people, they just don't know what that was me when my mom wanted to be cremated. I was like, what is this? And how does it work? But it's quickly becoming the number one choice for, and what's crazy is that fact that it's becoming, even though economics is so important for most families, this is becoming the number one choice for people of all socioeconomic status, the wealthy, and those maybe that can't afford. It just seems to make sense to a lot of people. It just seems to be better for the environment. It just seems to not be as stressful. It seems to provide more flexibility. But it's not really just one demographic that's making this choice only because it's affordable, but it's everyone's moving that way, it feels like.
Gosh, there's so many questions that floated through my head. So when you say a regulator comes in and is looking to make sure that you're following regulations, when you first got into this, what were some of the regulations you were most surprised about? When
I was first just exploring everything that goes into building a crematory, right? Because we built from the ground up. We didn't buy an existing business and then kind of take over something that was already nice and running. I had to learn everything. So it was just me making a lot of phone calls and doing research and calling professionals in the industry. But, I just think one of the things that probably surprised me so much, so when you think of the machine that performs the cremation, in this world, it's called a retort, is what it's called. Okay. And when you look, we have to work closely with the EPA because you're emitting emissions, right? And so when you're combusting materials and things like that. And so when I found out that this new modern equipment is so clean and so energy efficient that a crematory in modern equipment emits less emissions out of its stack than a Burger King does.
Wow.
Like that's like literally true. Like a Burger King's putting off more emissions than we are, just because of the way that equipment works. And I just think, but as working with the EPA to get all of our permits and working with, the inspectors from the state that come down and kind of just walk through your facilities to make sure that all of your equipment is in good standing order, that it's all clean, that everything's put together well. And like I said, those are the things that I think we pride ourselves on. You can always find corners to cut, but it's just not in our mindset to do that. But we do know that there are operators that do that. And so sometimes I think what you have to fight is you're trying to establish your reputation in the community is we're always going to do things with the highest level of excellence, is having to deal with some of the stigma that's there because of other stories maybe that have cropped up in newspapers because of other companies that haven't done things always with integrity, and that's gotten them in trouble. And then of course that makes the papers, and then in the public's mind sometimes it's like, well, is that how it works? Is that how it happens, all across the industry? And no, it's not. Everybody, has the opportunity to make their own reputation. And so yeah, we just want to do things really well.
I'm sure in your industry you've heard horror stories. What is the example of one of those?
Yeah. Oh, geez. I hate to even talk about them because I hate for people to even think about that. But it's, well, I guess recently, I know there was, I won't say any names, but, one was just if you don't really maintain your chain of custody well, which is not hard to do in my opinion, you have to really be sloppy and haphazard not to do that well. So I don't want your listeners to think like it can happen easily. It really can't unless you're just really careless and sloppy. Like we have certain protocols in place to maintain chain of custody of individuals that you just have to really not care to mess that up. But there was a company, local to the area, not long ago that just was getting really sloppy and not maintaining chain of custody and, returning the own remains back to a family. And then that coming to light, because families will then ask us sometimes like, well, how do we know? Which I don't blame them for wanting to ask that. But then, as a business owner, it frustrates you that your competitors sometimes are allowing things like that to happen because then it casts doubt for the public on the industry sometimes. And so, so there's other stories similar to that, but I don't know how it gets much worse than that if you're the loved one expecting to get your loved one back.
Yeah.
But again, and I think it's just, so for us, the way we offset any sort of doubt in those areas is we just always feel like if we can just get before the family and present ourselves, we're going to earn their trust because they're going to just see that we're different. It's not who we are. We're going to do things with the high. I always say to my customers, I tell them every time I'm with a customer and they're on the other side of the table, a lot of times we'll hear them say at the very end, they'll say, wow, Ryan, or to someone on my team, you guys have been so good to work with. You've taken what was a really difficult moment and you've made it a little bit easier. And one of the things I always say to our customers is, hey, at some point, all of us are on that side of the table. And I just want to know that when I'm on that side of the table, like I was with my mother, I want to know that I'm working with people that are going to do things exceptionally well and take really good care of my loved one while they have them in their charge. And so,
do you have an example where somebody you were on that initial call and it was pretty rough, and then it ended really well?
Yeah. I think for probably where we see that happen sometimes is not every family dynamic is healthy, you know? And so we'll get some really broken families that have just lost a loved one. And there was already a lot of tension in that family, and mom didn't get along with this son, and this son hasn't talked to mom in 5 years. But now when this loved one dies, everyone wants to jump in and be the decision maker. So now as the funeral director, you're dealing not just with a death, but you're dealing with all the dynamics of the family that can just be crazy.
Yeah.
And so, you don't
want to be the referee necessarily.
No, and they kind of try to almost force you into that situation, but that's exactly right. And you've got to remind them like, look, hey, we have certain protocols from the state that we're mandated to follow based on like who has what's called the rights of sepulcher. In other words, who has, if so-and-so passes, who according to state law has the first immediate rights to make the decisions about what happens to that individual. Because you'll get families where everyone's got to say, everyone's got an opinion. And maybe at first it's not clear from your perspective just yet who really has those rights until you do some digging. So you'll be getting bombarded from different phone calls from different family members. Well, I don't want this. And they said this was going to happen and I don't want that to happen. And you're a little bit in that referee position until you find out for sure who's got those rights. And then you try really hard to just work directly with that individual. But I mean, there have been moments or people, their brother had the right to make a decision on behalf of the loved one that passed. So he calls and he says, hey, this is what we're doing. So we go and we do the removal and we bring them to care. And then a sister that lives 2 states over found out he's at our, well, I didn't want dad to be cremated. I wanted him to do this, this, and this. And so she's really mad. And then By the time we get through the whole process, though, I think the more we've interacted with her and the more opportunity we've had to we kind of lower the temperature of the room, I think, just in the way that we talk and the way that we engage with them, the way we remind them, hey, I know that maybe this wasn't your choice, but I do want you to know your dad's in really good hands. I do want you to know you don't have to worry about him right now. We're going to take very good care. So sometimes, we're able to just kind of talk them down a little bit, and maybe that's how we see some big turnaround. Most people, though, they call and they're just broken and they're hurting. And they're just looking for someone to take care of this situation. And they're grateful when you do, and when you do it well. But yeah, I guess when you get those broken family dynamics, that's where it can get a little squirrely and sideways, and who knows what's going to happen. But we've seen a lot of that turn around, though, and then they end up being pretty good. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
You talked about the trends leading into cremation. So economical, religious, etc. Celebration of life versus funeral. You're seeing that also become an uptick. Could you kind of explain why people are wanting to do more of a celebration of life versus that traditional funeral?
Yeah. I just think, I guess there's a couple ways to look at that. One, with the celebration of life that comes with cremation specifically is, time and place of your choosing. You're not forced to make a snap decision in just a few days and hurry up and have a funeral, right? So incredibly stressful and a lot of pressure. But a lot of people, I think, you go to those, when I grew up going to funerals, it was a very somber, very heavy, very, in a lot of ways, emotionally draining event, right? And it just was heavy. It was really heavy. And I don't know, this is maybe anecdotal. I don't know if this is exactly, because I haven't really seen research yet on why that particular shift is happening so much, but it is. But I don't know for sure why. But, I think more and more, just as just a thought though, like, celebration of life is taking something that was kind of tragic in a lot of ways, and rather than focusing on the heavy loss, which obviously everyone has to grieve and everyone has to deal with that in their way at some point in time, right? But I think, like, in that gathering, it's like, let's celebrate the life that they did live. And I think people are looking just for ways to bring, I hate to say, more positive into their life, because you look at just the news cycle now, and you look at social media now, and you look at the world now, and you don't have to go out and try to find negative news. It's bombards us nonstop. So I think when we can control the narrative a little bit, it's like, let's talk about something positive. And remembering the loss is important, but I think for a lot, but what about the amazing life that they lived, and that part of it, But purely from a cremation standpoint, it's convenience. It's, I can do this later. I'm not rushed because I have a body now, so I have a limited window of when I can do a funeral. I can do this at any time, any place that we want. And when you've had time to already grieve and mourn, then you kind of are ready now to celebrate the life, because you've already worked through a lot of those emotions. So I think that contributes to it some. Yeah.
That's really good.
That helps.
Yeah, that's really good. I think the big thing we're trying to promote is for people to start planning ahead as much as possible.
Yeah.
And start having at least conversations about hospice, about end of life, what's going to happen, and how we can best take care of who's left behind. And my wife and I are going through, because of this podcast, we're actually going through our estate planning again. Gonna do kind of, I don't know if funeral is the right word. I think probably celebration of life is where we're leaning, but and trying to fill out all the paperwork, so to speak, ahead of time, and just thinking, my kids aren't in a place to make any of these decisions. And to be honest, I don't know that my wife would be either, in the middle of everything. So what kind of gift can I give them to say my goodbye if I don't get a chance to say it,
Yeah.
the way I want to. And, I think in the process of going through this, it makes you think about your own mortality and how important the time you have with the people, and really prioritize things a lot better, because I have not done that. I've been very career focused most of my life, and it just runs in my family. I come from a family of very hardworking people. But it's like slow down. And then it's funny because I'll have a conversation with, my 14-year-old or, one of my older kids, and they'll, I don't know, they say, talk about some song that, I kept playing all the time or something like that.
Right.
And it annoyed them at the time. But in my mind, I'm going, I'm going to play that song at my celebration for sure, so they can be annoyed one last time.
That's right.
But just little things like that, that not only are trying to give a gift after you're gone, but also getting you laser focused on right now, and the time you have left, and that sort of thing. And so that's really what this whole podcast is really about. Is it's just saying, how do we keep people from getting taken advantage of, abused, be in bad healthcare situations? How do we direct them to good people that are local and have their heart and passion in the right place? And all of those things, but then there's this other underlying tone of how can we help people live better lives now that maybe aren't elderly, maybe are way far from it. Maybe they're just kind of on the cusp of caregiving, or, they're thinking about parents that are getting a bit older, and they can start making some of these decisions for themselves and that sort of thing. So I love everything you've said. You've really had some good things.
Well, to piggyback on that, John, just a little bit, you're talking about prearranging, what we call in the industry, right? Like making prearrangements. And we get phone calls from people in the community every day about that. Like, hey, what do I need to do right now to just kind of take care of everything now, so that in 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, my kids, my wife, my family won't be left wrestling with the decision that what do we think Dad would have wanted? It'll be done. And like you said, that's a gift. Like, it really is, because in that moment of loss, so much converges on that family at one time with the loss of that individual. And the most pressing thing that they feel like, I got to hurry up and decide right now is, what are we doing with Dad? What are we doing with Mom? Would have they wanted a funeral? Would have they wanted a cremation? If they wanted a funeral, where do you think they would have wanted that to have occurred? And so to make those decisions for them and give them the gift of, in that moment, not being able to turn all their attention now to just the loss of you and the grief of you versus, what are we going to do? Some people are going to thoroughly plan those moments, and they're going to think about, hey, what songs do I want at my service, and what flowers do I want there? And they're going to be really thorough. And that's awesome to take that approach. But even if you can't take that approach, just having, most of the people that call us, they're calling us saying, Ryan, how do I just make arrangements now for my cremation so my kids don't have to make that decision? And it's not as difficult of a hill to climb as probably most people think when that happens first. And this is true. Like, family calls us, I want to take care of my cremation today. I'm probably not going to die in 10 or 15 years, but let's do that now. It's okay. Do you have 15 minutes real quick over the phone? Yeah, right now? Sure. Yeah. Okay, I'm just going to gather a little bit of information from you. And there's basically a form that I gather to start that contract. I fill out the form while they're on the phone. Then I say, the only thing we need now is schedule a time for you to come by the office to sign it. We'll give you a copy of the contract. You'll make payment. Make sure you hold on to that contract and that your next of kin knows where that's at and who that's with. Because whenever you pass now, they'll just call us and everything's taken care of.
Wow.
And the beauty of that too is when you sign, I don't want to sound like a salesman, but when you sign that contract today, you're locked in at that price. So if you don't pass for 10 years or 15 years and prices double or triple or whatever, your services are guaranteed at the price you paid. Your family's not going to pay more for it. So there's a little bit of a financial benefit there, but really the big benefit to me is the peace of mind in the moment of what you're giving your family. So for your audience that's looking to get affairs in order and things like that and take some of that stress off the family, whether you're calling Eden Cremation or you're calling another provider, it's still a good idea. I would encourage you to make those arrangements. It's not as difficult as you think. Literally in 20 minutes, it's over. And so It's not a hard thing to do. And then you have that peace of mind and now move on, enjoy life. And that's one less thing that you have to think about or your family has to think about. So
And you're getting these calls every day.
We do. We get, I mean, today I probably had 3 of those calls, just 3 different probably people calling Eden today saying, hey, what do I need to do to get my affairs in order? And
wow. So in the last 5 years, have you seen that trending up with pre-planning?
yeah, I think people are taking a more active role in just let's get our house in order, and I think, again, we're living in a different time than social media and the access to information is so prevalent now, like you had to go do your own research at the library and find all this information for yourself, or just hope that at the nighttime news, they'd run an episode on something like this. But now you got your podcast that's constantly bringing awareness. And I think now that people realize, oh, that's all I got to do. And that's how I do it. Like, okay, let's do it, and takes a burden off. So, yeah.
What has the journey looked like for your company? Were you consumer direct at first, or did you work with funeral homes?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Actually, when we opened Eden Cremation, we didn't come from a family that worked in the death care industry. So we really wanted to make sure that we launched well, and that when we went public, we were really ready to give the public a really good experience right out of the gate. Very seamless, very fluid, very good. And so when we opened, our plan was, hey, a lot of funeral homes in the area, and this is in any city in the United States, don't have their own crematory. They're outsourcing their cremations. Now, the consumer doesn't always know that. They're just seeing that so-and-so sells cremations, so they come and do the pickup, and that must be them doing the whole thing. But what they don't realize, that chain of custody does break up. The funeral home comes and does a pickup, and then they're taking it to a third-party crematory. They're doing the cremation. They're going back, picking that up, bringing it back, calling the family. And so when we first opened, we said we're going to do cremations only for funeral homes that don't have their own crematory, to really get comfortable with the back of the house process, managing cases, managing cremations, getting our processes and our SOPs just really locked in and dialed in so we can do that well. So that when we flip the switch and we go direct to the consumer, like, okay, this problem has been solved, we're good. Now let's really focus on customer service to the consumer. So we started being a trade crematory, just providing cremations only to the funeral homes. And really, it was only about almost 8 months ago that we flipped the switch and went from being a trade crematory, which the public hadn't heard of, to suddenly Eden Cremation, which now you can Google, or you can go to our website, or the community is very quickly starting to find out about us. And so we've been at it really just with consumers for about 8 months, and it's been a really good 8 months and really taken off. And so, yeah.
That's amazing.
We made that transition. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
What are you going to do when you pass away?
Yeah. Well, I think now I cremation. And I'm not saying that because I'm trying to promote the business, but like as I work, for a lot of those same reasons that it's making more and more sense to everyone else. I think it just makes more sense to us, to my wife and I as well. I know my wife for a long time, she could just never imagine being cremated. It's like some people, they just can be like, oh, I don't care, I'm dead, whatever. What does it really matter? I'm dead. And then other people just have then you have those who's like, I don't want to be in the ground. And it's like, but you're dead, you just said. And then there's others like, well, I don't know if I want to be cremated, but working around it, it just seems to make a lot of sense to me. I think we'll be cremated. Yeah. And as a veteran, I don't know, maybe I'll just go out to the VA cemetery here in Springfield, and that's where I'll be placed. Yeah. If you are a veteran, and it's really a great actually situation. If you're an honorably discharged veteran from any branch of the service, you automatically have rights to be placed in any VA cemetery for free, and it's a great benefit because VA cemeteries are always taken care of very well because they're government cemeteries, and so they're clean, they're nice. The one here in Springfield's really nice. And we do a lot of cremations for a lot of veterans that are being placed there. And they have the opportunity in that case, they can be entombed in the ground, or they can be placed into what's called a niche or a columbarium, like in a wall. And their spouses can be placed there as well. And that's just a free benefit to them. And then they do a military ceremony, like a commitment service for them, which is a really beautiful thing for the family to experience. If their family was in the military, it's a pretty neat thing. So.
Never really thought about it, the options out there that you can choose from. So after being cremated, you can still be buried if you want to.
Yeah.
You can be in a urn. It seems like it gives you way more options.
Way more.
Yeah.
You know, if Grandpa had a favorite lake that was his fishing lake and that was his thing. I mean, this is the kind of stuff we hear, you know, like Grandpa wants to go to his lake cabin. He wants to be at the cabin. That's where he wants his remains spread, you know, or, you know, Dad loved the mountains. And so we're all going to go as a family to the mountains. You know, I had a family going to Alaska a while back because Alaska was his great place, his getaway. And so scattered, you know, I've had golfers. I don't know if this is what they did. You know, I'm not name dropping, but dad had Pebble Beach and it was his favorite golf course. And so he told his son, next time you're out there leave a little bit of me at each tee box.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, you know, people get very creative about spreading, entombing, burying, being on the mantle.
Right. I mean, what a gift.
Tons of flexibility.
What a gift.
Yeah.
I told my kids, and I've already told them this, that, I mean, my plan is to put a letter together of what my wishes are for each one of my kids. I got 4 kids. And just so they're all on the same page. And then I'll probably give them all some of my ashes. I'm planning on being cremated. And with, you know, marching orders to travel and to get out there and to take me along with them. If I don't, love it. You know, those are just little things, because I do that with my own mother. Yeah. But my father, he wanted to be cremated. He was in the military, but he wanted to be buried in a plot in his hometown in Kansas. But one of the things I want to put out there as a tip with my dad, we tried to go the military route, but they had a fire, and his discharge paperwork, apparently they could not find it. And I talked to, you know, a couple of veteran organizations here in Springfield, and they really tried to run the gauntlet, but they said, there was a fire. We didn't actually have the paper, but you know, he was honorably discharged, you know, like he was in the Navy, and, you know, he went through the whole thing. But if you're out there and you're a veteran, make sure that you have that paperwork handy for your family, because that can be a hang up sometimes. For sure. And for those that were in the military, they know what form that is. It's a DD-214. You know, that's what I had, you know, and it's your discharge papers. And if you're a veteran, it's like your golden ticket, because you need that for any benefit that you might get as a veteran. But, you know, I don't know when your father passed, but you know, before documents like that were digitized, they were just stored in warehouses or things like that. And now everybody's documents are digitized, and a lot have been converted, but there would have been a period of time before that all got converted over to digital files, that it was just stored in paper somewhere. And if it got burned up, then the evidence of you, I guess, was gone, which would be very unfortunate. Yeah. So, it was bad luck. Yeah. But, you know, at this cemetery, though, like if that's somewhere as a veteran that they want to be placed, they only need 2 things. They need a copy of their DD-214, and they just take it out there. And then they need, at the time of passing, a copy of the death certificate. And as long as you're an honorably discharged veteran, those 2 documents will get you and your spouse, if that's what you choose, placed at the VA cemetery. It's a real simple application process. You can do it well before you ever pass. Like, you can apply for, you don't have to wait till then, but like, you got those then, you know, the DD-214, you can go out there anytime and start the application. And it's nice. You know, it's a free benefit, great cemetery. So when you're talking $12,000 to $15,000 for, you know, buying a plot and all that goes into that, for sure. Yeah.
Wow. Looking ahead, what's your vision for how end of life care can continue to evolve?
Yeah. Well, I think, you know, whatever it is, it's going to have to keep cremation in mind, because like we talked about, where the trends are going, if we do get to those numbers by 2040, that means 8 out of every 10 people are choosing cremation. And, you know, people are creative. When you're doing cremation, we've talked about a lot of it on this. There's so many different things that you can do with the remains of your loved one, from jewelry to we work with custom glass blowers that can create really beautiful custom glass blown chandeliers or vases or things like that, with some of those remains blown into them. Or like, so when you just look at, I think whatever it is, it's going to shape around cremation, and that is the primary form of disposition for Americans. And then beyond all that provides, the flexibilities that go with that and everything else, I think the evolving is going to be, the great separator for me in business has always been customer service. right? And just how a business goes about keeping itself relevant in front of the public eye, but never compromising on their core values and on the level of excellence that you serve people with. And so I've always thought really most businesses out there are commodities. There's other people that do what they do. It's just, but what sets them apart? And more often than not, it really does come back to the experience you give the customer. You can both be in the coffee business, but if one person makes you feel differently when you come to their coffee shop than the other guy, you're going to choose the one that makes you feel better, you know? And so I don't know how it evolves really, other than we're quickly moving towards cremation being a very normal form of disposition. And that was not always the case in the United States. And I think for funeral homes, I hate to use this language, but it was the language that was shared with me when I started researching this industry. They said, Ryan, funeral homes hate cremations because it doesn't pay their bills. Their business model, the big properties, the cemeteries, the hearses, the limousines, the large staffs, the chapels, they have a lot of overhead. They need to sell a $12,000 to $15,000 funeral to stay viable as a business. They didn't build a business model that could stay viable doing a $2,000 cremation. So when a lot of families, and this is just my experience, so a lot of families call the funeral home and they say, we want to get dad cremated. They try to talk them out of that. They try to upsell them at a time when really you don't want to be selling to people, but the funeral home feels compelled to because they need to. They need you to help pay the bills. And a $2,000 cremation doesn't help them pay the bills. And they literally call it, a lot of them, cremation the redheaded stepchild in the industry.
Oh, wow.
And so that's part of where we came in and we said, but more and more people, that's what they want. So we're not trying to sell people something they don't want. We said, how can we build a business model that can sell the cremation at a very affordable price, still be viable as a business, but not compromise on the experience that we give the customer? And so the evolving of the death care industry, funeral homes are going to have to evolve and either reorient their business model for where the future's going, or they're going to die. And that's why you'll see a lot of these funeral homes now across the United States that still have the mom and pop sons' names. Most of them are being bought out by large conglomerates. There's a few key players internationally that are swarming in and buying up all the funeral homes. So they're holding the same name, so it still feels local to the community because they think, oh, it's still the McCracken and Sons Funeral Home or whatever. But really it's owned by a conglomerate up in Canada. And a lot of people don't realize that. So it's really lost its true community-centered approach because the owners aren't connected to the community. At the same time, they're not making accommodations for where the market is going towards cremation. And so it'll be interesting. And when we start getting close to that 70% of Americans, it's going to be interesting to see what starts to happen to a lot of funeral homes.
We have kind of tried to bring that to the surface in a lot of industries. We see it a lot in healthcare. There's a lot of private equity. And I don't know why they picked healthcare very early on. And we have a lot of data that shows how bad that goes in the healthcare world, because you have people who are very profit focused that aren't in healthcare as a career, but they are in the business. And so they're making decisions and putting pressure on companies, loading them up with debt. And then those operations are now hamstrung. And so they can't perform the quality because they can't afford the staffing. They can't afford supplies, you name it.
Right.
And so it's this big surprise to some people that, some of these companies are really flailing and they think it's still the mom and pop agency that started and owned it, a couple of decades ago. They have no idea that the strings are being pulled from, a big corporation several states away. And what you bring up is really, really important for our listeners to understand is why ownership is so important. We're primarily focused on Southwest Missouri, but our audience is starting to grow outside of Southwest Missouri because of the topics that we cover everywhere.
Yeah.
So having said that, what is your region? And if somebody's listening outside of your region, what are some things they need to really be asking to make sure they're getting good quality?
Yeah, that's great. No one's going to love your business like you're going to love your business, right? So it's true. The temptation is there when a lot of businesses grow to sell at a very great cost, and I certainly get that. But oftentimes the business suffers as a result. You're right. Our region really is, I always like to say, kind of like in a nutshell, everything from Joplin to Lebanon and everything in between, But we really, there technically isn't any place we won't go in the state, but obviously we have a geographic area that outside of that, then a mileage fee starts to kick in and things like that. But really, the vast majority of Eden Cremation's business right now it's between Joplin, Lebanon, everything in between, and north or south 50 miles in either direction, but I think, for people that are outside of the state or definitely well outside of our area, and they're looking for a provider, a crematory to handle that for their family. I think it does matter if the facility owns their own crematory. There's a lot of brokers out there that they have an office somewhere. They sell the cremation, but they're not really doing it. Not that that's bad, not that you can't still give a great customer experience with that model, but if you're the owner of any company, you lose control when the more things you outsource, the more control you inevitably lose. There are things you can do to try to maintain some semblance of standards, et cetera. But when it's not happening in your company, you lose some control of that. So I always say, ask if they have their own facilities. If you're not anticipating your loved one dying for a while, go visit the facility. In this industry, I think more than maybe hospice is probably actually, I would say, is this way too. Google matters. Those reviews, people want to know, hey, if I'm going to give my dad to this company, I want to see what other people said about how they treated their dad or their uncle. So it's amazing how many phone calls I get, and I don't even solicit this. They just say, you know why we called you? And I say, no, but I'd love to know. They said, we read your reviews on Google and we love what people were saying. And I recognize that very quickly in this industry where touch point really matters. People read that stuff. And so read the reviews, I guess, in your community about that crematory and see how they're treating the public. But because we hear that feedback a lot. So that'd be a couple things.
We went to a dentist for a while. Wasn't a very long time, but we were satisfied with the service, and they were going through a buyout. And so a big company was buying them out. And then we started seeing new faces, and then pretty soon we started being upsold like crazy. The feel of it was completely different,
Yeah.
And the thing I sometimes think about is, that's one of the first signs that you may not be dealing with a company that, not saying that there aren't on-site owners or local owners that aren't great at what they do or whatever, but the feel of it oftentimes, like, it's one of the things that I kind of tap into when I'm trying to search for a new company, is like, where's the owner? Like, is he there, or who owns you? That sort of thing. And if they don't know the answer to that, then they've answered my question, because I really do want to deal directly with an owner. I want to know that if I have an issue that I can somehow talk to that owner and deal with those issues directly. So it's really tough though, and Google reviews are really a great place to start to make it easy, to take it one step further. It's definitely calling them up and saying, who owns you? Do they live in this area? Who's making all the decisions? Right. Yeah, that's good. That's good. It does make a difference, I think, when the owner's involved. And we're still small enough, that any family that uses Eden services
somewhere in that customer cycle, in that loop from first point of contact until we're closing that loop, they're going to interact with me. There's not one customer that we've had yet that hasn't interacted with the owner of the company. And so I have some really great employees that represent us very well, do a great job. But again, no one is going to care about your business the way you care about your business. And I really do feel like that's, so when we have like on everything, we have like, family and veteran owned, it's true, but it's not just owned, it's operated. Maybe I should change that to owned and operated, because we are very, very involved in the experience and the business and the customer interaction. And I think it makes a difference because your employees see you and they see your level of commitment and your standards. And I think then they want to try to match that and meet that, and they know you're there and you're the owner and you're the boss. You're not just some guy sitting in an office, like you said, 3 states away, that the only thing he's looking at is his computer screen and numbers and how we doing today on the numbers, you know?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So true. So true. And some of these things are, the events that you deal with day in and day out are memories that most people are going to have the rest of their lives. Their experience as well as you had. You will never forget the experience you had, and the experience you provide for others makes a huge difference.
So
and
true.
I think sometimes people don't realize how many things like this are going to stay with them forever. And it's really important they make a good choice.
Yeah. It's good. It's true.
Is there anything else you'd like to add or something we haven't asked that you'd like to address?
I don't know that there's anything you guys haven't asked, but I've really enjoyed this, and it's been great, and love what you guys are doing for the community. I guess just, hey, whether your listeners are in this area and they're going to do cremation or not do cremation, or they've chosen Eden or not chosen Eden, do your research. It is a big decision. It's a big moment in your family's lives, and you want that to be a good experience for you, for your loved one. And I can't speak for everyone else, but I can speak for Eden Cremation, and we will take very, very good care of you or your family if you do choose to use us. And that's our commitment to you. And thank you. Thanks for having us on.
Thank you.
I appreciate it.
Ryan, we can tell you're passionate about this, and I think a lot of people wouldn't really, they probably just haven't even thought about it at all. But I really appreciate what you do. I'm glad you're a local owner, that you really care about people's experience and how difficult those situations can be. And I can tell you handle those with grace and help people feel dignity and all of that. So thank you again for what you do.
Awesome. Thank you, John. Thank you, Spencer.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
With In Good Company, Elder Care in Your Backyard, we're trying to bring local providers that are really caring for the people in our community. Please, if you're struggling with figuring out what to do next, we're going to leave some information in the show notes. And, if you want to ask more questions of Ryan, I'm sure he's happy, or some of his people are happy to answer any questions you might have.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
And we'd love to stay connected. Follow us on YouTube, Facebook, and on Instagram at In Good Company Elder Care Podcast.
You can also find us on X, formerly known as Twitter, at IGC Pod, and on TikTok at IGC Elder Care Podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to In Good Company Elder Care in Your Backyard. I'm John Ray, and I've been joined by my amazing co-host, Spencer Ernst. Special thanks to our executive producer, Alex Wallace, for helping bring this show to life. Until next time, take care, and remember, you are always in good company.